Welcome to the No Fear podcast and the No Fear live broadcast. I'm your host, Tony Lauer. If you're into mindset training, performance psychology, personal development, you'll dig this new format. No Fear Live is a unique broadcast, and it's different from the No Fear podcast. We decided to go live because we wanted to create the opportunity to interact with people like you all over the world, where anyone can log in and ask questions, and in some cases, you may even get invited into the show. The great thing about the live broadcast is that it's much more personal for the listener. That's you. Remember, self-defense isn't always about a confrontation with someone else. The first and most important fight is winning the one inside your head. Dude, you're like a regular on the show. Akshay, welcome back to No Fear Live.
Honored to be here, brother.
Is this your third time on? Second, third?
I think so. I think third time. Yes, sir.
Third time. Holy shit. Show everyone your fingers first. Wow. Holy shit.
Eight more to go. Hopefully next time we speak, I still have all 8.
Right. So for those of you who've never met Akshay and didn't listen to the other calls, he's got a mind that I'm somewhat envious of, because I study fear and psychological fear and have spent my life trying to understand it and help other people with it. And he's taken it to like this other level where, he's on a mission, and it's kind of interesting to help people fall in love with the idea of suffering. And if you don't understand that in the metaphysical sense, that sounds like an insane thing. Like, why would you want people to suffer? My take on that, and we haven't talked about this yet, my take on it is that life is a roller coaster ride, and there is inevitable and invariable elements of suffering. This ties into whether you're into stoicism, whether you're into the victim party. Why me? Why does this always happen to me? If you can learn to shift your relationship with that, in the way I tell people, if you can change your relationship with fear and turn it into fuel instead of your opponent, you have no choice. In the moment that you get a fear spike, you're fucking scared. What if you just said, well, how can I use this to educate myself, or to run faster, fight harder, or what have you? So that's my take on this. And I know you've got an elegant mind. Why don't you share? Let's kick off. What do you mean by, hey, you want the world to learn to fall in love with suffering?
Like you said, one way or the other, we are going to suffer in life. It is part of the human experience. You can do all you can to avoid it, but it's going to happen. So when you learn to fall in love with it, when you learn to, as I like to say, suffer well, it's the single most important skill to master, because once you do that, you can find bliss, you can find joy in the day-to-day content of this human experience, no matter what is thrown your way. And if you dig deep beneath the why of why we do anything, right? Why get that job? Why get that relationship? Why get that car? Whatever the thing may be, it's ultimately, you can call it happiness, fulfillment, enlightenment, whatever the word you want to use. And the path to getting there is to embrace suffering. Because when you fall in love with suffering, everything becomes beautiful. And this whole notion of pursuing happiness, that's the very barrier. That's a deeply flawed concept, because when you view happiness as the goal, then suffering becomes the impediment on the way to that, right? But if you actually seek out meaning, seek out what I call your worthy struggle, then suffering is no longer a barrier on the path. It's part of the adventure. And so that's what I want to help people do, and very much what I do through my journey is, it's not just about embracing suffering when it's thrown at you, but actually kind of step 1 is embracing it. Step 2 is seeking it out. Because when you seek it out, that's how you actually learn to fall in love with it. And that's how you gain the rewards on the other side of it. You cannot know your strength unless you struggle. You can't, you can't know courage unless you experience fear. It takes no courage to do something if there's no fear. Similarly, you can't really know your power unless there's pain. So what I want people to do is to embrace it and then seek it out as a vehicle to attain the rewards on the other side of it. And those rewards are, that's why I do everything I do. It could not be more beautiful and profound to tap into that space and to access those rewards.
I love it. Did you owe money to someone in Japan and this is Yakuza? Yakuza? Uh, we'll talk about the frostbite a little bit later.
Roger that.
I have an interesting question for you, because I make this joke when I teach how to manage violence. When I teach, I was going to say self-defense, but everyone teaches self-defense. I'm teaching people how to manage violence, and self-defense, the way it's taught, and managing violence are different. Managing violence comes to you, unless you're, and just Akshay's a former Marine, and he's got a very fascinating background. If you're new to him, we'll put up his website later. You got to go check out his background. We'll dig in, listen to some of the older interviews. But managing violence, our intuitive mind will, if you're looking for a fight, whether you're professional, amateur, in the street, growing up, nobody, this is my hypothesis, nobody consciously selects an opponent that's going to fuck them up, right? And of course, there are, like crazy examples of people get beaten up every Friday night. They got a screw loose and they go start a fight with whoever. I'm not talking about like the weird nutcase. I'm talking about the general idea that if I'm a mugger and I see potential soft targets walking down the street, I don't go, Akshay, look at that guy. And you go, dude, can't you see he's printing? He's carrying a gun. He's got cauliflower ears. He's wearing a tap-out shirt. And he's got that baseball bat from The Walking Dead. Like, what do you? Oh yeah, right. Okay, we would never pick the guy that looks like he's going to fuck up, plan, put us in the hospital, or kill us. And to me, that's the same thing. Like, if you're a serial killer, you're picking a softer target. Yeah. There's a part of our, and so bear with me, because this is like this little journey to get to my question about buffering on purpose. So there's a part of that I believe our intuitive survival system that won't do something that could possibly fucking destroy us. Unless you have a death wish, right? And so how then do you pick, like for you, who've done so many extreme things, like what's your was it 10 Days in Darkness?
I've done 10 Days in Darkness and 7 Days in Darkness. I've done that twice among many other adventures.
Like if the power goes out in the middle of the night, I'm like freaking out. I'm like, oh fuck, like, oh, how long, let alone on purpose 10 days in darkness with no cell phone. I can't, I'm not on TikTok, but I am on Instagram. What am I going to do? I'm making fun of myself here, guys. I have more discipline than this. But just this idea of, and here's where I'm going with this, is we will select things that challenge us, that stretch our resilience, our mental toughness, our idea of I can handle whatever life throws at me, which is the philosophical like end state. And by the way, I love what you said about the chasing of happiness, because when people are having a good day, they're skipping through a meadow in slow motion going, oh, look at this, oh, bliss. Oh my God, like DoorDash brought my food on time. And they're all happy. And then they open it up and go, I didn't order this. What the fuck? They fucked up my order. And they go from, not realizing their first world problem. And so if you learn to find, and you'll dig this, I'm sure you've read this before, in Zen nomenclature is like perfect imperfection. Right? That whole idea of there's perfection that doesn't exist, and then there's imperfect perfection. Like this is the best this is. This is my question. Trying to word this in an intelligent way in my brain. We do these things and we intentionally suffer, and we go, look, like anything that life throws at me will pale in comparison to what I just put myself through. Except, is that true? Because if something's outside your discomfort zone, you'll still have a fear spike. You'll still go fuck and still hold your breath and go sympathetic. So how do you reconcile that, or have you talked about that? Is this a discussion in your trainings?
Yeah, it's a great question because you're right. Like I could do the hardest thing and then life will throw something my way that was way harder. So for example, I mean, I went through a very, very challenging divorce a few years ago. That shit was one of the hardest things I've been through. And already up to this point, I've done a lot of hard shit, right? From all my
Right.
expeditions, darkness, been through the Marines, into war, all that kind of stuff. Curveball came my way that I did not expect. And I broke my sobriety. I went into a very, very dark place. So I did not handle that well. But that's, so it's not that training for suffering is going to prepare you for all the shit life throws your way. Something new can come that you weren't ready for. But what it does give you is the weapons to rise back up faster. It doesn't mean you won't go through lows. I still go through lows, man. Life is fucking hard. We all know that. It's going to punch you in the face from time to time in a way you didn't expect. But what it does teach you, if you do it, and the whole point, kind of what you were saying, it's not just about suffering for the sake of suffering, right? Like there was a time in high school, for example, I used to cut myself. I still have these scars on my arm, burning myself. I have this scar here. There was no virtue to that pain that I was seeking. Nowadays, I still seek out deep, intense suffering, but there's a purpose to it. There's an intention to it. There's a conscious reason I seek it out, right? To what I would call awaken my own Buddhahood. There's a spirituality to it. So that pain is not just pain for the sake of pain. It's suffering with purpose. It's suffering with intention, and recognizing that the suffering is the means, not the purpose. Right over here, I was just doing this shit just for whatever reason. I was in a weird, dark space when I was doing a lot of drugs in high school. But now I recognize that the suffering is the vehicle. It's not the reason for why I go, but you have to battle the dragon to find the treasure, right? So I go to access that treasure and bring the wisdom back from the edge for myself. And of course, those I help through my work. But it doesn't mean that life is not going to hit me in ways that I wasn't ready. It just makes me stronger to get back up a little bit faster.
And I think that, of course, it's the language, I think, that might throw some people off. I have a tattoo on me somewhere about embracing the struggle. Mm-hmm. And I had it on my. Is it the one on my ribs? But it sucked. It was like, okay, embrace this fucking pain. But the idea is I'm big on semantics. I write a lot, and I think about words deeply. And I think I'm hung up. I'm hung up as a contrarian, a deliberate contrarian, to make the conversation a little bit more dynamic for people. Because I get what you mean, is the idea of suffering, and it's a lightning rod, right? So it'll attract like-minded people, which is who you want to coach and mentor. Anyhow, is there one thing that I don't know if you follow my buddy Andrew Huberman and his work, and when he talks about like dopamine stuff, that when you're always raising that, like the drop is low. And so now it's like, you've done 7 days, you've done 10 days, you've done Arctic, you're going to Antarctica, you've done ultra marathons. How do you get stimulated for, someone goes, Akshay, we're going to spend the night with no electricity. And you're like, okay, it's kind of fucking boring, okay, but okay. Right. Hey, it's cold outside. I'm going to go for a walk around the block. And you're like, dude, I spent a month in Antarctica by myself. So obviously the people you coach, how do you reconcile and explain that to them? Because there's a neuroscience to this as well, where you go, like your body, and I love this for everyone listening, there's a point just in training where if you start working out, you don't need to be, in the beginning, you got to set your alarm and make yourself do it. But then there's a point where at a physiological level, you go, man, I can't wait to work out again. It's a sensation in your body that right? So talk a little bit about that. Like for you personally, you've done things, where how do you get stimulated and excited for the next thing? Then how do you coach people about that?
So great point. And as Huberman even talks about, right, when you push that high, like when I come back from an expedition, the lows are quite low. It's hard to transition because, as he talks about, you don't just return to baseline and dopamine, it kind of drops lower, right? So I do experience that. And the way I wrestle with that, the way I deal with it in life is to balance the dualities in the human experience. So I'll explain what I mean by that. So, in my world, especially in the adventure world, if you keep pushing the edge, it's very common. A lot of people end up dying doing what they do, right? Like there's a great documentary on Netflix, The Alpinist, this guy who died at 25 pushing the edge. And it's not a judgment. Like everybody makes their call, right? And I used to free solo, not at like Alex Honnold's level, but I used to free solo rock walls 100 plus feet where, if I fall, I would still die. And then, like you said, you're seeking that next high, because that edge you keep wanting to push further. So the way I wrestle with that with a high degree of self-awareness now, which I didn't always have, is balancing the duality of the human experience. So for example, there was a time in my life, I remember going for a run and I saw this sign that said 5K fun run. And I had visceral disgust at the idea of a fun run. Like, you don't run for fun. Every run you have to fucking suffer. That's not that, you shouldn't run for fun. But that was a problem. I was bringing in suffering into my life in all areas, because clearly I'm one who embraces and seeks out suffering. But there's a duality to it, right? In life, there's a series of dualities: pain, pleasure, contentment, discontentment, ego, humility, light, darkness, life and death. There's all these dualities that encompass the human experience, right? In Buddhism, they talk a lot about non-dualism. It's kind of the yin yang. Now, we frame, in kind of generally speaking in society, we frame one side of the duality as bad, right? The darkness is bad, discontentment is bad, ego is bad, fear is bad. All these kind of one side of stress and recovery, another duality, that's bad. Stress is bad, right? That's the inherent problem, is that one side of the duality is bad. It's not bad or good. It just is. And every side had its place. So the way I navigate the duality is by coming back to the other side. So I'm always in my life looking for one duality that's causing me friction, and then I go play on the other edge of it. So when I recognized that I was demonizing the idea of a fun run, I was like, okay, this is a problem. It hit me later when I realized I was just bringing in suffering in every area of my life to the point of unnecessary, right? And I was like, all right, I'm going to go play on the other edge of that duality. And I called it suffering and play. You can call it whatever you want. I love that you brought up semantics, because words do matter. And even that, I use the word suffering very intentionally. That's not accidental. Because, you can say challenge, and suffering is kind of the amplification of pain. It's the word that feels the worst, right? It hits the hardest. So when you can actually develop a positive relationship to that word, it makes challenge sound lighter, right? So the point is to say that I'm always looking at the other edge of the duality. So after Antarctica, for example, I'll come back and it actually makes you appreciate everything more. I'll come back and I want to focus on the relationship side of my life. I want to focus on some lighter things. And it makes you value that. I mean, to this day, man, when I take a hot shower, I cannot tell you how fucking grateful I am every hot shower, because I know it's going to be gone very soon. And I know what it's like to be fucking freezing all the time. Right. So always be playing with the duality at every point in my life. Like when I went into the darkness recently for the 10-day, I was playing with the duality, control and surrender. I'm a giant control freak, right? My world is in my fucking hands. I'm going to control my fate and my destiny. So I was experimenting and playing with surrender. And that's how you kind of navigate the edges and allow yourself to find bliss in the entire human experience. Even right now, when I go out in a night sky, yesterday, I walked out of my house and just looked at the stars, because in Antarctica, where I go for 110 days, there is no darkness. I will miss sunsets, a night sky, and sunrises, which are some of my favorite times of day. So I appreciate every single thing. So it really just requires a conscious awareness to prevent. Look, your brain's still going to experience that dopamine low. I know there's a low coming after 110 days in Antarctica, but when you have conscious awareness and intentionality, you can appreciate both sides of it. I'm grateful for the hell I'm about to endure in Antarctica and the beauty, but I'm also incredibly grateful that I have a nice fucking comfortable home to live in outside of that.
Wild. Your mind has been greatly expanded by these things. And I love the, I get the words, I get what you're doing with the word suffering. And that was just me being not devil's advocate, but the intentional contrarian.
I love that you brought it up.
So that you could share that, because people need to listen to that. I for years wrestled with the idea of should it be called no fear, or should it be called choose courage, or should it be, I always come back to the fear, because type A personalities don't like to talk about fear. They don't want to admit. And so there was almost like a stubborn intentionality on my part going, we're going to fucking use the word fear. I don't care that you are, ex-mil or in the military or this or that. I fear no man. Yeah, you do.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's just peeling that onion, so that I get that, because it's there are easier ways to grow our audience by using clickbait terms as opposed to going like this is the end of the day. It's embrace suffering and use your fear. Of all the things you've done, there seems to be, especially for endurance athletes, this like what's the attraction to the fucking cold? It's like I gotta get up like Everest or Antarctica or is it just because that's the most austere environment on the planet? Is it just that? Or there's something else?
The cold demands perfection out of you, and you cannot afford to fuck up or there's consequences. I mean, I honestly did not fuck up. I was wearing my gloves. I wasn't doing anything wrong. It still happened. But the point is, I like the cold because it demands so much out of you. And it constantly tests you, right? It constantly keeps you slightly uncomfortable to then force you to kind of transcend that and find peace within it. And what draws me to Antarctica or polar exploration, more so than even mountain climbing, because I've done a lot of mountain climbing, right? And I'll give you an example. I was on Denali, tallest mountain in North America in Alaska last year or year before last, a year and a half ago, something like that. And there's a point in what's called a 16 ridge at 16,000 feet. And you're stepping on this very thin ridge line. There's like 1,000-foot drop on each side. It's horrifying, right? This is an extremely thin ridge line. And the thing is, though, when you're in that moment, your mind doesn't have the luxury to wander. It's right fucking there. Your whole world is that one step in front of you. You're not sitting around looking at the beautiful views, right? Your whole world is that one thing. No exactly. You're not doing selfies and shit like that. So you're very present. And in mountaineering, the environment forces you into flow. And every day the terrain is different. Like every day as I go up and down the mountain, the views are different. The nature of the day is different. In polar travel, it is not like that. Right. Polar travel, every day is empty white nothingness. You're in flat terrain. So the environment doesn't force you into flow. So your mind wanders. And when your mind wanders, it will take you to places that you are not even ready for. And that fucking journey, like polar exploration is not as dangerous as mountain climbing, but it's a lot more suffering. And that's, to me, is the draw, especially in the hostility of a place like Antarctica, because again, there's no life out there. It's empty white nothingness. The storms are fucking savage. Like a polar storm is one of the most hostile, unforgiving environment a human being can experience. And there's a polar explorer from the 1900s who kind of summarizes it perfectly when he says, polar exploration is at once the cleanest and most isolated way of having a bad time, which has been devised. And having experienced a lot from running ultras to mountain climbing, it's incredibly true. And that's a huge draw for me, is because in that depth of isolation, because I'll be doing 110 days alone in Antarctica, literally no life. I mean, I will geographically be the most isolated human being on earth. In that silence, in that isolation, you really start to hear. You hear the things that you don't otherwise hear. To me, you can call it God, universe, whatever your paradigm is, right? And that is such a draw. And that mental challenge, while brutal, like sometimes where I'm skiing, an hour can feel like a fucking lifetime because your mind is just playing those games with you. But that's the draw, is navigating that, the challenge of that, the greater the depth of mental, physical, and spiritual suffering, the greater the transcendence. And that transcendence is an experience of God. And what I get to do, I get to open doors into the human soul that are so very rarely, if ever, opened. And opening those doors into the human soul is the reason I go. The suffering is just a necessary mechanism to get there. You can't open it without going there.
It's the first 10 levels in this metaphoric video game.
Yeah.
The big boss is in your soul. Exactly. That's crazy, man. That's a good deep answer. I didn't know where you were going to go with that. Of all the different arenas of suffering you've done, I mean, you just said the polar is the one that brings the most. It's the greatest. And I love that whole idea. Like it's all white. It's not dark. But how do you select? Like is it intuition or do you have like 3 years planned out? You go, I'm going to do this, I'm going to recover, and then this is my bucket list. I'm hitting this, because you've done a bunch of crazy things.
Yeah. For me personally, like I have not chosen to dedicate my life to entire mastery at one craft. Like for some big, like let's say mountaineers, their whole world is mountaineering. They want to pursue the next mountain, or ultra running. Me personally, I just like playing in the realm of suffering. And that's why I explore different ones. That's why I've run ultra marathons, done the 10 days in darkness, climbed mountains, done polar travel, even gone cave diving, scuba diving. Like I like playing in multiple different arenas.
It sounds to me like you can't just commit, man. That's just it. You're just not,
I know it's weak.
you're just all over the place. You just, holy shit. On our last interview with you, I think we talked a lot about the 10 days in darkness and that freak. Share a little bit about that with the audience, just in terms of like, because this is like the opposite of the polar type thing, but of course you don't have the weather risks and all of that, but just this idea, like describe this thing. You had gourmet food, candlelight dinners, your cell phone. But tell us briefly, like what this 10-day darkness experience.
It was sitting in a pitch dark room. I mean, so dark you cannot see your hand in front of you. Darkness, 24 hours a day for 10 full days. I chose to do a juice fast during for 8 days. It was just 2 juices a day, and last 2 days I did no juices, no calories at all, because I wanted to add hunger to the experience, of course, amplify the suffering a little bit. But when you actually sit in that level of darkness, you start seeing lights, because they say your brain releases DMT, so you see lights that are as real as any other light, and it's kind of go through these hallucinogenic experiences in that darkness, and it reveals things to you because that level of stillness, you're going to open doors within yourself that have never been opened. And whatever's coming through those doors, you don't know, right? It's not just all beautiful sunshine, rainbows, unicorns. It's also the deepest, darkest demons that you haven't confronted. And so you have to face whatever comes through. But bringing that to the surface is the whole point. In that stillness, you get to access those things. Because as Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So the whole point of this is to dig deeper into that place, to find those things you've never found before, and to me, to have those conversations and that experience of God in that pure stillness and silence.
Craziness, man. Wild.
It's intense. Wild. It's very intense, but beautiful.
How do you have you been out either alone or with people where there's a sudden scenario that it's dire, and like everyone turns to you and goes, because they think you're the guru with suffering? Have you had something like that where like I've had things, and it's funny, where I've had something happens and people just think, like, and I've never experienced it, something happens, a fucking I remember waking up and our whole house was flooded, and I might as well have been like a 35-year-old housewife in the kitchen, and there was a mouse under a chair, and she jumps on the chair screaming, and that's what I was. I was like, fuck, the fuck. It didn't even occur to me, okay, go shut the water, call this, do so how do you, and what I'm getting at is your suffering is intentional, it's planned, and it's what I tell people is really different, like when I teach self-defense. And because there's like a lot of bodyguards and doormen and cops and people who have had that experience, and then they write about it or they teach about it.
Yeah.
I've always pointed out, that's cool, except you are the sniper in every one of those fights. In other words, you're going, that guy's drunk and he's an asshole. I'm going to watch him for another 20 minutes. Then I'm going to tell my buddy here, we're going to escort him out, and he might pull a knife or a gun, or he might fight, but you're getting ready for the fight. It's not a surprise. And it's the sudden surprise. And that's like my specialty with the whole psychology of fear versus the physiology of fear. It's the sudden surprise violence or danger that is more dramatic because it hijacks executive function. You bypass your cognitive brain where all your theoretical answers are. And now suddenly you're in sympathetic survival mode. And what we need is the education there. So for you, as you were talking, I'm going, like, this is cool. And you know that I wouldn't have had you on here 3 times, if I didn't find you fascinating. But like, it's not like I go like this, and then all of a sudden you're in Antarctica and you don't have your fucking gear, and you're like, what the fuck? You're planning, you're actually even training for this. So you know the fight is Saturday night, you know who the opponent is, you know the weight class, and you accept the risks.
Yeah.
So my question, because I went in fucking 19 different directions, is how do you handle it? It was very refreshing and nice of you and transparent of you to talk about how, like, the divorce, like, even though you've got all this mental toughness, your idea of a successful marriage and relationship, when that fell apart, that crushed you, and you would have rather been in Antarctica or in mile 50 of an ultra marathon going, I can get through this. So talk about that, like when life has thrown other shit at you where you can't prepare, and going back full circle, everyone listening, I get the idea of, and I made a note before my friggin' electronic book died because I don't charge it, is that if I do this and I take my capacity and I increase my capacity for whether it's suffering or tolerance or strategic thinking or pain or whatever it is, my capacity increases and I'm getting closer to my self-actualization of my potential.
Yeah.
And then it's life throws you the curveball. You of course have to go, fuck. And then what you've got to remember, this is the self-awareness piece. I can get through this. I have suffered well in the past. So riff on that a little bit, and then any examples that you have of how you've made that course correction.
Yeah. So I'm always training because I didn't get into doing overnight, like 110 days in Antarctica. So I'm building that ability to endure that one step at a time and training myself very consciously. Like when I was in Vermont, not last winter, but the winter before last, storms would hit and I would intentionally go out into a winter storm and sit in a cold river, which immediately like gets you amplified and, it makes tense up. And I would practice, I would literally say to myself,
I got to interrupt and say, I did not anticipate you say, go sit in the river. The whole going out there, I was going, oh, good, he's stress inoculating. He's doing little things, but of course you fucking mean
of course, what else would one do?
The next level. I sat in a river after somebody hooked me up like Houdini in chains, and okay, go ahead.
You amplify, right? And then so what I would literally, but I would do this and I would pause and say, be the eye of the storm. Be the eye of the storm. Practice staying still, staying calm in the face of external chaos. So, and as you said, we're always evolving. Like when this divorce happened, I'd done a lot of stuff, but clearly I wasn't ready for it. Now I am a lot more ready for even relationship stuff. And since then I've navigated relationship challenges, right? Relationship shit just kind of hits you in a different way. But now I'm always I'm getting better and better and better over the years, regardless of what life throws at me and how it throws at me, at being the eye of the storm and staying calm in the face of chaos and mastering that space, right? Like you talk about when you teach, there's that instance the thing happens, but there's a space between feeling the fear psychologically and physiologically and what you do with that, right? And the key is mastering that space. So for example, I was in the Arctic just a few months ago on expedition, right? And this was the first time ever I've been in a polar storm solo. So I've been in many polar storms, but this was the first time alone. And I mean, hurricane force winds hammering me. Whole time I'm smiling to myself while skiing and I'm completely alone out there, right? You can barely see that much in front of you because it's a whiteout and I'm going, ooh, rah, motherfucker, this is my house. Let's fucking go. Like it's mad, right? It's absolute insanity because I'm alone out there. But I was smiling. I had trained myself, and being in a hurricane force polar storm is very panic inducing. It is very panic inducing if you're not careful, right? And the same thing the next day. Sorry.
What are you doing with this? Just I get the smiling and I get all that, and people listening to this, you got to understand like the stress inoculation leading up.
Stress inoculation, exactly. This did not happen overnight, to be very clear.
Yeah. But what are you doing in that? I remember being on my. You remember the Katana motorcycle? Did you ever ride bikes?
No.
It was like at the time the Katana came out, it was like the fastest motorcycle in America. Yeah. So I had this Katana, and I was driving down from Canada to go to Maine, and I'm driving down, driving way too fast, and drove like all of a sudden the fucking storm, right?
Yeah.
And I'm driving and the wind came up and started blowing me like I'm on the bike and it's fucking moving me. And I'm like, holy shit. And I'm like, trying to, I mean, slow down as fast as I could. But I thought I was going to die. And you can't, it was like how you described when you're on that bridge crossing 1,000-foot where I'm going, if I fucking lose focus here, I'm dead. I'm doing 80 miles an hour on a highway and the wind just came up and blew me towards the shoulder, towards the oncoming traffic. Anyways, where I'm going with that is I'm 185 pounds. I've got gear on the bike and I'm on a fucking Katana 750, which weighs a shitload. And this wind came up and almost blew me to my death. How much do you weigh, dude?
I'm 165 right now, working to get to 180 for Antarctica. Light, yeah.
So, like, you're on a flat plane like this, and there's hurricane winds. What do you? I just see like a scene from The Wizard of Oz. And you're like floating around. Like, how the fuck are you staying on the ground? Like you got obviously you're strapped to your kit.
I'm strapped to my sled. Yeah. I mean, there was days because I'm a tiny little brown dude, right? There's not a lot of tiny little brown people who are polar explorers. They're usually Viking looking motherfuckers, Norwegians. But it was kind of blowing me a little bit for sure. But you know, that's the thing is like for example, the next day, I was in my tent and the wind was hammering the tent. And in the Arctic, the wind changed direction. So instead of hitting from the back of the tent, it started hitting me from the side to the point that I'm literally in my tent like this, holding it because it's pushing the tent so far down, it feels like it's collapsing in on me. And I literally just sat there. I mean, it was intense. You feel the intensity of this, but this is coming back to the duality concept and why playing with this is a big reason when we struggle in those moments is we're resisting the isness of that moment. So what I mean by that is we're trying to say, like, in a very subconscious way, it's like, I wish this wasn't like this, and I wish the wind wasn't like this. But the second you just accept the isness, like one of my mantras, and this actually hit me in the Arctic, was everything is perfect in its isness, for it cannot be anything other than what it already is. So as an example, the day after the storm, I was skiing in very soft snow because there's a ton of new snow, heavy sled. It was brutal. Like if the snow was harder, it would have been a lot easier in that day, right? Now I could say, fuck, I wish the snow was harder. I wish it was easier. But I kept saying, thank you, God, for these perfect conditions. Because the conditions were perfect in that they could not be anything other than what they already were. So when you start accepting that the wind, in this case, your case, my case, right? This is just what it is. Everything is beautiful in its isness. So this is the duality of control and surrender. I surrender to what is because I can't change it, but now I bring in what I can control. And when you actually accept there's so little in life that we can control, and you just embrace the isness of that, and then you bring it back to, okay, what can I control without trying to fight the things you can't? The acceptance is kind of a foundation of spiritual enlightenment, right? So I'm always saying to myself, thank you, God, for these perfect conditions. And it doesn't mean you don't fight to create your reality the way you want it to be. Of course, I'm always working to improve my world into the way I want it to be. But all the things that I can't control, which are most of them, embrace it, accept the isness, and then create what you can. And that helps you master that space. So when you're being hammered by a storm, literally or figuratively in life, accept it. These were things I could not control. I will accept the isness, be with that isness, master the space between stimulus and response. What do I do with it instead? Now I bring in my point of power. Like in my case, how I set up the tent. I would go out every few hours digging out the tent while the snow was being hammered. That was what I could control. Other than that, I was like, there's nothing more. And literally there's a video actually on Instagram. I was like, I think I even say this. I was like, there's nothing else I can do, but just be with this and kind of smiling through it, because what the fuck else can you do? So learning to smile in that, but you have to train yourself. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to stress inoculate yourself through putting yourself in suffering. That's why I do it.
Yeah, I dig it, man. I mean, you ended up saying it a bunch of times, but it was just that acceptance. And it's, we have in our combatives program and our personal defense readiness training, we have, the 3 golden rules. And the number 1 rule is acceptance. If you can't accept what's happening, you can't create a strategy to circumvent it or to defeat it. Absolutely. If there's a part of your brain, conscious or unconscious, that's going, I don't believe this is happening to me, then guess what? This is happening. Right. And you just can't lean into it. So it's kind of It's kind of cool. I dig that. What else, man? What else is going on? Are you coming out with another book?
After I do this 110-day crossing of Antarctica, I'll write a book about it and the lessons and help others navigate their own version of an Antarctic crossing. But that'll be after. Right now, my whole world till I leave for Antarctica in November is training the mind, body, and spirit for 110 days, 1,700 miles solo coast-to-coast crossing of the entire continent of Antarctica, which has never been done before. So once I pull this off, it'll be the first ever human-powered, meaning no kites, no dogs, just man-hauling a 400-pound sled across the continent for 1,700 miles.
When you think about that, do you get an adrenaline dump, or you've done enough
Dude,
of these?
Fucking terrified, man. Terrified. Talking about this, you brought this up earlier, right? Sometimes we think like, oh, I'm not scared if anything is manly. You're hugely flawed. Like, I'm fucking shit scared of almost everything I do, but I don't care that the fear is there, right? Like, it doesn't bother me that the fear is there. Courage is what you do with that. So it terrifies. I mean, it excites the hell out of me, because getting to go into that level of solitude is going to be profoundly beautiful, but it also terrifies me. Because it's just the depth of suffering I'm going to endure out there. It's going to be brutal, and I don't even know how hard it's going to be. But I don't know entirely.
There's nobody with you, no crew.
Completely alone.
Are you going to try and document it somehow? And if so, how?
We are filming a documentary around it. The documentary, we've filmed a bunch of footage right now. They filmed me coming out of the darkness when I was in Mexico. They filmed me in Arizona here, training, dragging two very, very heavy tires. They came to Iceland for an expedition. They filmed me in the Arctic when I was out there. We came out for a week to film. But on Antarctica, I'll be alone. So really, it'll be just kind of a GoPro doing kind of a video journal and documenting it. The nature of Antarctica is like, unlike mountaineering documentaries, there's only so much of empty white nothingness before the audience just stops giving a shit. It looks the exact fucking same every single day, you know? So it's more kind of my journey of madness that will inevitably ensue as I go.
I don't know if you did you ever see the original Avatar movie?
Yeah.
Like when the guy's like in space and he's just talking to the recorder, you know, it's just gonna be it's gonna be like that.
Video documenting. You know, yeah. I even have I brought, you ever seen the movie Castaway?
No, but I know
Tom Hanks. So you know, if like he's in a desert island for 4 years and he has a little volleyball that he talks to called Wilson. So I'm kind of bringing along my own little Wilson. It's a little stuffed pillow, yay small, with a laughing Buddha on it, because it's two of the most important tools to navigate this. Is one, a sense of humor. You have to be able to laugh when things get fucking hard, and they will get hard. So that's why it's a laughing Buddha. And the other point for me is like awakening my own Buddhahood, right? So it's a laughing Buddha that I've named Bodhi, and that's my own little Wilson to talk to out there. So it gets quite psychotic. It's insane how quick you lose the sense of the fact that you're talking to a stuffed pillow. Like when I was on my last expedition in the Arctic, it was 10 days solo on the third out of the 3 expeditions. And 6 days in, right? Usually what I do is I have my little buddy talking, like while I'm cooking in the tent, I talk to Bodhi. We're chatting and shit like that. And so in the snow, and then when I go into my tent, I bring him in, put him in the corner, chat a little bit before I go to bed. And so this 6 days in, I forgot him outside in the vestibule of the tent. And while I was going to sleep, I realized that I forgot him. So I bring him in and I go, Bodhi, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to leave you out there. And the crazy thing is I wasn't just saying the words. I genuinely felt guilt. I felt sadness, almost like I left a friend or a puppy out there. And this is only 6 days in. So you can see how after 100 days, it's going to get fucking wild.
That's crazy, man. It's wild. The whole thing's wild.
Pretty surreal to experience that.
What you do is wild. For people new to you, talk about Fearvana, the book, and what they could expect if they invest in that.
So the concept of Fearvana is that fear and nirvana, which are often framed as two opposites, right? That they're not contradictory and they're in fact complementary. And that fear is not the antithesis of nirvana, but fear is the access point to it. So the whole premise of the book is to help people develop a positive relationship to not just fear, but to, as we've been saying, to suffering, right? Under any kind of suffering, fear, stress, anxiety, to develop a healthy, beautiful, positive relationship to it in order to then use the suffering we experience to find, live, and love what I call your worthy struggle. which is your path in life, right? I don't use the word passion very consciously. Not that passion is bad. It's good to have passion for what you do. But often, especially to the younger generation, when I speak, when you say follow your passion, it conveys this idea that it'll all be sunshine and rainbows if you love what you do. And it fucking won't. Like, I love what I do, but it's goddamn suffering, right? So that's why I call it your worthy struggle. You know, it doesn't have to be polar travel. It could be whatever, playing the guitar, playing chess, but Fearvana is designed to help people embrace the suffering on the journey in order to find, live, and then love whatever their worthy struggle will be.
Nice. The, what type of, we never talked about this, what type of online, either self-directed digital learning or education, live Zoom stuff, what do you do for your community? Never talked to you about your ongoing training stuff.
Yeah, I do have like digital training programs. Like I have a program called the Fear Chasers Alliance where I share all the different mindset pieces, because I've gotten, as you can tell, quite advanced all over the years in the learnings, and I get quite intense. I mean, even as we speak right now, I'm in the midst of a 7-day fast. I'm 3 days into the fast. And while doing this, I'm doing something kind of unique. It's a little out there. I'm consciously inducing trauma, consciously activating new trauma as a mechanism for post-traumatic growth. So I'm always self-experimenting with new tools for mastery. Like I went deep into studying method acting. It was a big reason why I'm growing this out. I mean, I wish I could grow a big mountain man beard, but I guess at 38, I still have a fucking baby face. So none of this grows too well. But the reason being is when I look in the mirror, I don't want to see someone civilized. I want to see a fucking savage. So I use method acting as part of my training. So all of these tools that I've developed, I teach in these digital programs called Fear Chasers Alliance. And teach my tribe to apply it in whatever their own lens. We cover everything from like basics of productivity and discipline to more kind of advanced next level shit like that I'm currently doing. That's one program. We are like launching a clothing line in Fearvana, a supplement line. I've kind of sidelined it a lot of it right now, just in terms of training for Antarctica. I mean, I still teach in my Fear Chasers Alliance program, but I'm not actively doing anything because training is kind of a full-time job right now until I come back from this crossing. And then once I pull that off in the documentary, then we'll focus on the business side more, the brand, and then also the relationship piece. Right now, I want to eventually, meet somebody, get a family and all that. But right now, my life's a little too fucking out there to date.
Who knows? You might meet someone in your next trip, right?
Who knows? Maybe at the South Pole, I'll run into somebody.
Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly.
This is happening in November, dude?
November. I'll be flying to Chile mid to end October. And then I just got word from ALE, which is Antarctic Logistics and Expedition, just like 2 days ago, that it's all looking a go. So it's coming up very quickly, man. I'm feeling the nerves big time, but I'm excited. This is my whole world's been leading up to this in the last 3 years.
Your longest till then was a month. The longest that was a month.
Yep.
And so this is going to be how long?
Just under 4 months, 110 days. So
Wow.
almost 4 months.
I just did for an internal group, one of our 90-day challenge I just wrote about this week. The idea of don't let the math beat you. I think that, it's the first week in and people are already starting, like you start off strong the first weekend and now like people are starting to like, I can't keep up. And I told them a story of a fighter that I trained who just before his fight, we're downstairs in the bowels of this, old fight Coliseum place in Montreal. It's back in the 80s and he's shadowboxing. And I said, "How do you feel, Sean?" He said, "Good, coach. I'm nervous, of course, but I feel good." And I looked at him. I said, "Well, you're supposed to be nervous. You're about to get in a fight. The guy's going to try and punch your fucking face in. And this was in the era of Roberto Duran, Sugar Ray Leonard back in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And so Duran was known as like hands of stone and face of stone, where he'd look at you and it was that facade. And I said, even if the guy's looking at you like Roberto Duran, know that inside his physiology is fucking pumping, adrenaline, and he's nervous too. He's just mastered the facade." And he goes, "Thanks, coach." And he starts shadowboxing again. He's moving around. I sit down and I'm like, I'm kind of like gloating to myself because I'm thinking, yeah, that's kind of like I was Mickey there in Rocky 1 going, "You got him, don't worry." And you're like, But something starts to nag at me, Akshay. Something's nagging at me, and I realize, fuck, I just gave him like a Zen fortune cookie answer. You're supposed to be nervous, face the fear, do it anyways, blah, blah, blah. And this is what I think is so special about the No Fear program is we tell people like you need to specifically identify as best you can what the fear is, what the trigger, what the stimulus was. And I looked at him and I said, hey, Sean, I got to apologize for that answer. And he goes, why? It was great, coach. It calmed me down a little bit. And I said, yeah, but I didn't ask you what you were nervous about, what was triggering it. And while I was saying that, I'm thinking maybe his mom's at ringside or his girlfriend or his dad, or maybe he hadn't told me about an injury. A lot of fighters that train, like if they hurt their ribs or they were not sleeping or eating well, they wouldn't tell me because they want me to pull the fight. Pull the fight. So my brain is trying to guess, what is it? And he goes, I go, what made you nervous? And he goes, it's nothing. It's stupid. I go, it's not stupid if it's making you nervous. So I pull it out of him. He says, and for everyone out here, like this was an amateur kickboxing title fight. Amateur title fights are 4 rounds. Amateur regular fights are 3 rounds. He says to me, I've never done 4 rounds, and I keep wondering, can I do 4 rounds? He said, I know I'm in shape. I can spar 10 rounds, but you know this from what you do. And what made me think about this is going from 1 month to 4 months.
Yeah.
And follow me here, because this might, well, you've already figured this shit out, but it might be interesting to my audience.
No, sure.
He goes, I don't know if I can do 4 rounds. I mean, I can, but I don't know that. So immediately we understand, like as a coach who's thinking always like hyper analytically, like I am, if you got a fighter who is worried about having enough gas to make it to the 4th round, he's going to fight more hesitantly in round 1, 2, or 3. Is he going to miss his minimum 8 kick count? Is he going to move a little bit more with a little bit more trepidation that's going to get him caught because he's worried about his gas tank? And which speaks volumes to stamina and endurance and knowing that you can do that. So I look at him, and I would never have guessed that. Of all the things that were running through my head, it wasn't, can I do 4 rounds?
Yeah.
So I looked at him, Akshay, and I said, can you do 2 rounds? He's like, yeah, of course. I said, so just do 2 rounds twice. And at the end of the 2nd round, we're in the ring, and it was a 16-foot ring, so 14 feet from the other fighter. We hear him say, coach, what round is it? As the guy's like, and the guy goes, round 2. And I looked at Sean and smiled, and I went, can you do 2 rounds? And he said, absolutely, coach. And he went out and he won the title that night.
That's
so
awesome.
What we did, so like what we teach now is we tell people, never let the math beat you. Never let the math beat you. Yeah. If you hate running a mile, you can run 400 yards. Do that 4 times. Just run once, run. And I have no doubt that that's part of your psychology is like, oh my God, I got to do 10,000 steps today, right? No, it's like I got to do 1 step.
Yeah.
And the next step. But
I love that. So you can't be, no, that's great. Like I can't be thinking about 110 days when I'm out there, right? Like 110 days doesn't matter. It's living in the back. Can you make it's just 1 day. It's all it is 1 day, right? Like that's all I have to do is just 1 day. Yeah. And then that's multiplied over 110 times, but it's just 1 day. And like a great spiritual way I approach it is, can I live this day? And I'm not perfect at it in the normal world at all, but I try to be very conscious. Can I live this whole, it's not so much live every day as if it's your last, because then you like wouldn't do the hard work to, because if this is my last, I wouldn't go tire dragging for 2 hours because fuck that. But it's more like live every day as if it's your entire lifetime. Because actually this hit me in the Arctic. I call these spiritual downloads when I'm alone out there, and I was skiing and it hit me that the person I am this morning is never going to exist anymore. Like that version of me is dead, right? He's gone, never going to exist. And so every day I'm kind of dying and being reborn. And so can I live this day as if it's my entire life? And the Greek philosopher Heraclitus says, no man enters the same river twice, for he is not the same man and it is not the same river. And I never fully I heard that quote a long time ago and I was like, all right, kind of makes sense. But now it's like, I know what he's saying. I don't just cognitively understand it. I viscerally know it, right? Like we are dying and reborn every day. And if I think about that and own that and consciously ingrain that, can I live this day as is my entire life? And if it is my entire life, then tomorrow fucking doesn't matter. This
Right.
whole day is my world, my reality. And when you do that, like you said, it prevents the math from beating you. Because if you do, whether I'm running ultras or doing a 110-day journey, if I'm thinking about 110-day, I fucking lost. I've lost that battle before I even set foot in Antarctica.
I dig it. That reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. It's be willing to give up who you are today for who you could become tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know who said
Love
that.
that.
Great.
That.
Dude, is there anything that, I mean, I always love talking to you because it's like, just like we're sitting in a coffee shop, just chit chatting. Is there anything that you'd want to share with the people? Again, this is, live in the middle of the day, and but we then reshare it, Apple and Spotify and iTunes and all that, or whatever the heck it's called. Is there anything that we didn't hit that you'd want to share?
I think we talked about obviously embracing suffering. And I guess the one final thing to master that space is always owning. I might have said this to you before, but I think people who found this really valuable is you're not your thoughts, you're not your feelings, you're not your experiences. You're the thinker of your thoughts, the feeler of your feelings, and the experiencer of your experiences. There's a space between what is and who you choose to be outside of what is, and always be working consciously to remove that attachment to this as real. Like I've worked with people who say, I have depression or I am depressed, and it becomes their identity. Instead of saying my brain is going through a state of depression, that is not me. That is not who I am, right? I'm not my mind. I'm not my body. I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my feelings. Like you talked about, your feelings are fleeting. They're constantly fleeting. So are your thoughts. But it comes with a relentless practice, a relentless self-awareness to master that space. And once you do that, that's how you also learn how to embrace suffering. And that ultimately is the most important skill. Can you fall in love with the suck? And you do that, you master that space, your world is yours.
I love it. Dude, as always, great having you on the show.
Thank you, brother. It was a pleasure.
I definitely, if some wicked insight or something happens between now and when you're leaving, hit me up and let's get online and talk about it. But absolutely, when you get back from the trip, we got to have you on and talk about it. But, again, if something in the training, in the journey to November comes up that you want to share with the world, you always have a home here.
I appreciate that, brother.
Actually, is there? I just wanted to see if there's anything here. Guys, go get his book. Obviously, it's available digital. Do you have an audio version?
Yeah, digital audio paperback, and all the profits go to charity. We donate all of them. We've supported survivors of sex traffickers to former child soldiers, built a school in West Africa. So
amazing.
Profits do some good.
Dude, you're a good man. Okay, buddy. Stay safe. I will speak to you soon.
Yes,
Hang
sir.
in the background here. I'm going to end the broadcast. Everyone of you who logged in and listened, thank you. Remember these things. There's Akshay's website, fearvana.com. Go check it out. Go subscribe to his newsletter. If you can, check out the book. I know for some of you listening, some of the stuff might have sounded a little touchy-feely, woo-woo, but it's not, right? It's not. You're just not used to that nomenclature, and that's the struggle. That's the struggle that we all have. We wrestle with reality, and we're in denial most of the time. Where we go, I mean, how many of you listening to this have said over and over in your life, I don't fucking believe this happened again. I don't believe this happened to me. As the faster you can go, okay, this is what Akshay is talking about. This sucks. I've got to go through this, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a medical, whether it's financial, whether it's violence. It's a choiceless choice. It's right there. Or you fucking close your eyes and it's going to run you over. So the faster you can get tactical, the sooner you get through it. And then the beauty of going through it is you become more resilient.
Absolutely.
So there you go.
I had to apply these same principles in war. So, they in a very extreme circumstance. So absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, man. So good to connect again. Stand by. Okay, guys. Also, if you're listening to this, share it, please, and follow us on YouTube. I need to grow our YouTube because that just seems to be the easiest place to fucking make shit happen these days until the the overlord globalists change something else and blah, blah, blah. Okay, peace out. Stand by.